Hi everybody, Ted Simpson here, ready to do another fine painting for you folks. Today we're doing a version of Bob's Silent Forest, and I'm going to walk you through and hopefully give you some tips and tricks that, in case you have any questions, if Bob didn't go over that in detail, I take a little bit more time. I try to give you extra information on how to create a successful painting. So I've already done the first part. I've coated the whole canvas with a liquid acrylic. It's called black gesso. Made the whole canvas black, covered it with that very, very, very thin amount of liquid clear. And what I'm going to do is show you the undercolor. Bob takes a little bit of the sap green, a small amount of phthalo blue, and even a touch of the Van Dyke brown. Now, I'm mixing these colors up. Scrape it, spread it. Scrape it, spread it. That gets you a nice mix really, really easy here. Now, after I've mixed it a few times, make sure you're getting it all off your knife. You can adjust that color. Now, a lot of times when you have this big pile of color on your canvas, it looks rather black. But if you take a little bit of your white and just mash some color into it, you get to see the tone, the value, the shade. Wipe that away. Don't put that back into your mix. And I'm going to adjust it a little bit. I'm going to add just a little bit more blue, a touch more brown. And let's mix those colors again, scraping and spreading. There we go. Now I'm just looking for a small amount of color. I don't need to make a huge pile of it. In fact, I put out way too much paint for this painting. Let's check that color again. Oh, it really didn't change that much. I'll tell you what, let me leave that right there. And I'm going to add a bit more of the blue. Really want to see, well, some kind of a teal-ish color. I don't know, some sort of blue-green, but a little bit to the green side. Now, there we go. Take a little bit of that color. Let me mix it right next to it. There, it's definitely a little bit more blue, but still got a greenish tint to it. That's what I'm looking for. So let's get rid of this. You figure out the color that you like. And every time you do this, you're going to get slightly different shades of bluish green. I think you'll like it. So I'm just cleaning this up here. I don't need that stain there. So to make life easy, I'm going to use the big old 2-inch brush here. Tap some of that color across the width of the brush. And let's put some all over this 12 by 16. You know, that one brush full basically did half the canvas there. And reload, and I'm just getting that color off. Little overlapping circles or crisscross strokes. Getting some out there. Now I've got about 3/4 of it done. Look at that, like just enough. Just enough. When you're starting out, it's okay to make a little bit more than you need because it can be a challenge to color match and have to make more of the same shade there. So you don't want to worry about all that. Just make a little more. I'm trying to figure out if there's any dark spots there. I think I got a pretty even coat. If you're ever unsure, touch your finger to it. If it comes away with color on it, you probably have the right amount. Okay, cleaning our brush. Just gonna wipe some of it off, kind of pinch some of that excess color off. And I got my bucket and screen over here. filled with that odorless paint thinner. You want that stuff from the art store, not the hardware store. The hardware stuff isn't as refined, and thereby it's way, way, way stinkier. I've got my bucket over here off screen. Let me just beat the devil out of it. And I'm going to actually make sure I get all the excess paint thinner off. It's that same paper towel. I just keep folding it, getting it off there. Good, good, good. Now, you could do this. You don't have to use the 2-inch brush here. Sometimes the 2-inch brush is a little big for a smaller canvas, but you can if you want to. Now look where I'm tapping. See that? Just getting some color up here on the top part of the brush. That gives you a little bit more control. Okay, now a very light touch. I'm just going to swirl. Doesn't matter what direction. Just dancing in some shapes here. Getting some color. Letting it work around a little bit. Pick up a little more white. Just swirling and whirling around. You don't need to worry too much about this. This is just going to be background, a background light source for our scene here today. I'm going to go through a whole blending process. For now, just getting some color out. Wind it up, stir it up. And I'm going down to about a little more than halfway down the canvas once I get there. Getting some over here in this corner. Ooh. So wears your finger out a little bit. You run out of paint, you can always flatten some more back down. Picking up a little bit of color. Beating it into the bristles a little bit. We're not looking to dump this on and make this look like a winter scene. Let's get some color out there. You can have it be a little brighter in some spots. Just add some more. Something like that. Now, let's clean our old brush out a little bit. We don't have to go through the whole brush cleaning process here. Just knocking some of the excess off an old paper towel. And then, using a crisscross stroke. Notice how I'm bringing that handle over a little bit. Start working around here. And of course you can make this as soft as you like. But I tell you, that 2-inch brush makes it happen in seconds. Now, just because I can show you here, if there's any spots that you blended a little too much or a little bit too much of that undercolor will darken that white right away, you know you can go back and add a little more. See that? Just knocking a little color on again. Wipe your brush. Go over with that light touch. Light touch. There we go. I kind of like that. I like it a little bit brighter there. Here and there, tapping a little color on, winding it up there, and then do your blending process. I love doing these things more than once. You know, it gives you practice. I think we got it. And we get to jump right into the scene here. Let's see. Take some of this residue out of our way here. And Bob made up a color, a couple of colors. Let's take a little bit, I'll just do it right down here, what the heck. Maybe make a bit. Touch of the alizarin crimson. Scrape, scrape, spread. Look at that. Scrape it up, spread it off. There we go. And while we're at it, let's take a bit of white. Let's go over all the way to the other side. How about that? It's a big palette. Might as well use it. A little bit of the phthalo blue and a little touch of brown, just to dull it down a little bit. And you can mix this to whatever degree you like. You want a little bolder, richer color? Add a little more. A lot of times, you know, it looks a certain way here on the palette, and it'll change a bit once you get up onto the canvas. So we can always play around with that in a little bit. We don't need this background color here anymore, so I'll get that out of my way. You should see some of my classes here. Sometimes the whole palette space my students have get all covered up. Nothing wrong with just doing a little bit of palette maintenance and keeping it somewhat clean. Now, I briefly watched this episode. I didn't go over the whole thing. I get a sense of what colors Bob used, and I kind of do my own thing. So I'm going to use my filbert brush here. A little bit of Van Dyke brown with some dark sienna mixed in it, loading plenty of color into this filbert brush. There's a lot going on there. So, let's see here. Holding that brush vertical, I'm just going to drag down. Just something like that. Now, when I do that, occasionally it's not the size that I like, or you run out of paint about halfway through, so you can go over it a couple of times here just to give a sense of the size of tree you want. And typically the trees are a little narrower at the top than they are at the bottom, but it's really up to you. It looks a little odd if they're pointy at the bottom and wide at the top, but you know, it's your world. So, I'm going to come in here and show you here. Now, if I just drag straight through using the knife edge, you see I don't really get much on the knife. If I turn my knife sideways, you get a big roll. We're not ready for those big rolls yet, so Bob kind of slices at an angle. Clean my knife there. And look at that small roll of color. The smaller the roll, the more control you have. And I'm going to come up here and just gently touch the blade while moving the knife. And I put out these little lines, these little bark effects. You know, it's when you try stamping and pushing and in and out like this, it can kind of create these little, I call them like soft serve swirls. You know, like the top of your ice cream cone, these little icicles almost start coming off. So if you keep the knife moving as you touch it, it puts a little more vertical effect into it. Now on the other side, a very small roll of the shadow color, and I'm going to focus a little more on the left side. How much shadow, how much highlight is up to you. Either way, you just wipe the knife, you reload, and put some on there, but remember, leave a little bit of the brown. Let there be some of those deep shadows in there. There we go. Let's see, what am I doing here? On this tree in the background, there might be a few branches. So with a little bit of paint thinner, I know, ooh, you can see it dripping. You want to hold your palette nice and flat here. I'm thinning down some of the Van Dyke brown, dark sienna mixture, and I roll the brush as I pull away to wick some of that paint off and get a nice sharp edge. You want that nice sharp point, I should say. And here and there, maybe a branch or two. I like having these little short ones up here at the top. And as I come down, I make them a little longer, let them come out a little more. And once I get a couple on there, you can make some little mini branches coming off the main branch. Like the trunk, I try to have it a little thicker where these branches meet the trunk and a little thinner as we go out. That's what makes it look relatively natural. Now, using, oh, I did forget something. I always forget to put out one product here. A little bit of the liquid white. You know, I may not need it. I may not need it, but I'll have it ready in case I do. Sometimes you don't need to thin down the paint that much. Let's give it a try. I'm gonna pull out my highlight colors here. Ooh, a little more green too. And let's try our 1-inch brush. Where is my 1-inch brush? Here's one. There we go. So I'm going to pull a little bit of my cadmium yellow, a little Indian yellow, what the hey, and a touch of the sap green. I think Bob actually might have even used a little bit of black to make a very dull green. So instead of black, I can just put a touch of red in it. Red and green dulls out into a brownish color. Let's see what we got here. I'm just mixing up some paint and tapping. That tapping is important. Tapping and almost pushing in a little bit with my taps. That gets the paint right up on the tips of the bristles. Let's try a little bit more. A little more green, a little more yellow. I need more paint. There's the texture I'm looking for. Do you see that bumpy texture here on your palette? That's what we're looking for. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm holding my brush a little to the side, maybe a little bit down. You know, we don't want to just start slamming the whole brush on there, but just the corner. Now look how green this is here on the palette. Watch up here. Doesn't that look a little bit more yellow? So sometimes, if the color isn't right after a time or two, change it. There we go. A little bit of color in and around. Reload that brush often. There we go. Doesn't take too much to get the effect. And then, using that same technique, I just make some different shapes, and we can automatically put some little bushes down here at the base, overlapping the base of the tree. Isn't that nice? So this whole time I'm grabbing a little bit of color and then tapping it in. That tapping mixes the color somewhat. You don't have to go crazy and mix it completely. Let there be a little bit of variation. And I'll tell you what, let's put in some little indications of bushes, maybe even one way over here. If you change the color halfway through, almost looks like a whole different bush. Different shapes, different sizes, different colors. All of this adds a little bit of interest to your scene. You know, if you make them all exactly the same, well, that's kind of boring, don't you think? Change up the flavor, Bob liked to say. That's one of my favorite phrases he uses when he calls the colors flavors. I tell you what, a little bit of that bright red. Ooh, a little firecracker. Another favorite phrase there. Look at that. Now, I'm going to do something different here. I'm pulling down a little bit more of the yellow, a little bit on both sides, working some color in. Back and forth, grab my green. And I'm pushing up just a little bit, getting that little ridge to form. But what I'm really doing is getting the paint right up on the leading edge of my 1-inch brush. So I load, collapse those bristles, find the color that works, and then push forward a little bit, tapping the full width of the brush, getting that little ridge, and now we can create maybe a little bit of flat grass here. Let's try to define where this open area starts happening. Now I do have some undercolor here. I covered that whole canvas with that blue-green touch of brown mixture. So that's my shadow already built into the canvas here. Anytime you need to, you just stop, you reload the brush to get some right up on the tips of those bristles again. And then add in another layer. As I'm tapping, I'm running out of paint on my brush, and it's mixing with that undercolor to give you all sorts of highlights and shadows. All right, we got something going there. I like it. So now is where we get to repeat ourselves, okay? We did lots of stuff here. We know how to put a tree in. We know how to put branches on and then leaves on the branches, making some bushes, making the grass. So let's do all that again. Trying to avoid that little bit of paint thinner there. Titanium. What? Van Dyke Brown? Dark Sienna? You'd think I would loop that in post-production, but nope. I just go live here. I don't really do too much editing, and I'm sure if you've watched my videos, you know that. I don't do too much editing. So, bigger tree. Why bigger? Because we're moving our way closer. Things get a little bit bigger as we move our way down. Now maybe this tree is the exact same size and of this one, but since it's closer, it's going to appear a little bigger. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to give this just a little bit of a foot. I kind of come out at a certain angle here that makes sense to give it a little sense of a little root system there. Moving right along, I say we need a little buddy. Maybe he's got a friend right next to him. Right next to him. You don't have to make them the same size or shape. Pushing in, bending those bristles, get that color off. I went down just a wee bit lower. A wee bit lower to give it a sense that this one's just a little in front. Just a little bit. Now, how about one more? And it's going to go right down here, all the way down to where my grass stopped. Look at that. I covered up some of that background tree. And the leaves. I don't want to go down too low because I only brought the grass down to a certain point, you know? I like it. I had to take a step back and assess. Sometimes you can't really see what's going on until you take a couple of steps back. All right. What do we do next? That's where a pop-up quiz would show up on the screen if I had any kind of production value. Since I don't, we're just going to highlight these trunks here. So, touching, now I can slice to the side, or I can go right in and just pull to the side. And get that little roll of paint. Maybe a little bigger roll. Now, sometimes on these bigger trunks here, Bob would actually make a long pull at a certain angle and get a different bark effect. It's really up to you. Now, when I'm doing this, sometimes when I'm yammering on, I go a little bit outside my brown edge there. It's okay. It's okay. That tree just becomes a little bit wider is all. You can always clean it up a little bit. Going up and down here, touching while moving, creating some effects here. More of the highlight on the right side, and a little less as I move my way to the other side of the tree. Before I do too much else, let's put in a little bit of shadow. Sometimes those highlights start feeling so good. Now, if you have the steadiness, you can just bring it over like I'm doing here and touch. Sometimes Bob will turn his whole hand upside down to make it a little easier to get these left side shadows here. It's really up to you. And if you really want to get fancy, you could always put the paint on the other side of the knife and touch. It's funny, like when I'm teaching here, I was telling my students, oh, don't do that, don't do that. Do it like Bob did. But you know, sometimes Bob would say, whatever way works best for you. So if you want to put the paint on the other side and you feel a little more control there, that's just what you should do. You do have this short edge of your knife. Sometimes getting these smaller little bits down here, if you want to sort of get some down on the root system as well, that short edge will be your friend. Touch of this highlight right up down there, whatever part you think is catching this background light source, that's what you should use. Okay. I might get a little fancy here. And by that, I mean, since we have all these trees here, you don't have to do highlights and shadows on each tree. You can do all the highlights at once. Might be a little bit easier. Dance some color onto one here. Keep wiping the knife. If you notice here, my paper towel, I wipe my knife quite often. Every time I get a new roll of color, I wipe my knife first, because you will pick up some of that brown as you're putting these highlights on. Just dancing around here. Once it starts not working, first thing I do is wipe the knife and reload and try again. Typically it's because that brown got on there, or you're running out of paint and it starts feeling a little goopy when you get mixes of the brown and pinky colors. Get a little more going there. There we go. Now I'll switch over to the shadow side. I do like that upside down motion there. For me, it just seems to work better. I get more of these little vertical things. Now I want that bold color right along the edge there. It's okay if there's a little bit of brown showing. That's our dark background. Some of these trees don't have to have much blue at all. It's just a little cool shadow in the back. As much or as little as you like. Now I'm going to move right back to that small edge of my knife. get a little bit up there on the foots, the little roots, foots and roots. Don't forget about a little shadow. Just laying it on there in whatever degree you can get it out, or leave it deeper in shadow. It's up to you. All right, now, you know the drill. We got the highlight and shadow on. Now I'm moving on to branches. I thin down that color using the tip of the brush to make these nice and tiny. I want that paint to flow off the bristles. There we go. Sometimes here I come right off the middle of the trunk. The branches don't just grow on the left side or the right side. Come around the middle as well. And depending on how it's flowing, you can put a little extra branch here or there, either up top or down below. It's really up to you. I do like to say here, I like my branches to grow. So especially the ones at the bottom, let them come out a little more. Ooh, that one really came out, didn't it? However many here, and it's okay if they overlap the trees behind, you know, makes sense if they do. This one here, this very thin paint that I'm using, should allow it to go over anything I've done previously. A thin paint should stick to any paint that's thicker. Giving your hand a little wiggle and jiggle, little Bob calls it if you got a little nervous twitch there. Sometimes you can force that out, you know, just give your hand a little shaky shake. And get out as many branches as you desire. I do say that a lot, don't I? It's all individual. You don't have to make it look like mine or Bob's or anyone else's. Once in a while, I get a new brush full of paint thinner and I thin down my color again. If it's not flowing off your brush, look at that, it's really not thick anymore, really not thin anymore, it's not dripping. Just means that it evaporated. You just need to thin it right back down again. You do want this to flow out of the brush. I see it happen often here when people try to do too many with one brush pile. One pile of paint. Okay, so we've got our branches on there. And I'm going to come in here and you know the drill. I'll tell you what, let's change the flavor again. A touch of the phthalo blue instead of sap green will give us a different effect. Still going to add a little yellow, Indian yellow here. And here we go. Using the corner of the brush, I'm just going to dance a little cluster. I call them little clusters. So a little pop, pop, pop. Doot, 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 doot. 1, 2, 4, 5 taps per cluster. Doot, 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 doot. Sometimes 6 or 7. Depends on how well it's working for you. But I'm tapping in, tapping forward, getting that paint on the tips of the bristles, and using more of the corner of the brush so I can control where these go. If you just start slamming the whole 1-inch width of your brush, things can get away from you pretty quickly. probably the biggest piece of advice about these, move on. Don't keep tapping the same spots over and over and over again. It can definitely get away from you and start to melt and make all sorts of craziness when you overdo it. I added a little bit more yellow to this one just to see a different shade here. Do have lots of shades. Ooh, there was a little bright one. Do have lots of different shades of the same color here, and if they're all exactly the same, well, if you like it, go for it. If you want them to be a little more varied, change the color. You know the drill. All right. What's next? You should know. Let's get some color up here on the brush and across the full width this time, getting that little ridge of paint. It's timed for grass. Now, I'm going to use the corner of the brush here first, just to get some right over the edge of the right at the foots of these trees, just a little bit here. Maybe get some right up on the edge. You can let a little bit of this color climb up the tree, give it a little moss effect. I'll show you if I can remember this. Well, I'll tell you. Maybe using the small fan brush, getting a little bit of that color, makes it a little easier to climb up the tree. So let's see here. Let's get some color and start making some grass in front of these trees. Thinking about the lay of the land. A little bit of color, and watch how I fade it away as I'm moving forward. See how it just, you run out of paint, you just keep tapping, and it just gets darker and darker as you fade it away. I do that so when I reload my brush, I can overlap some of that fade and give myself a new bright area. Just a new little section of the land. Can't forget about the other side here. Let's just go. Now you may notice, look at these variations here of the black that I leave behind. It's almost, I call them fingers. These little fingers are kind of overlapping, crisscrossing, and this is going to be our path. So I leave a little bit there to help me define where my path is going to lay. And I don't know. I'm kind of playing around here, trying to figure out what looks right to me. And when you decide on yours, you could make it a path, you could make it a little creek running through the woods, maybe a little springtime thaw. Doesn't really matter. Whatever you want, try them both. Another little thing going on here. Another little outcropping. I'm not sure the term there. And letting it fade off in the corner here. Let the corner be a little dark. Helps draw the eye into the center. Maybe one more little highlight here. Let it just fade off. I like it. But you know what? In just about any Bob painting here, we gotta have ourselves a big old tree here. So, bam! Going down and up. Look at that, using the full width of this filbert this time. Lots and lots of paint here, just that way I don't have to go over it 600 times. Just making it nice and dark. Big old telephone pole looking thing. It's looking a little narrow at the bottom here, so let's widen it out just a little bit. There we go. Oh, here I am fiddling. And let's give him a big old root. That'll trip you if you're going down the path a little bit, maybe. And maybe another little root right there. Maybe one kind of coming off, just a little one. It just disappears right into the grass. Maybe even a third little root right there. Ooh boy, that's a big tree. Relative to this side of the canvas, that is. Here we go. You know the drill. I can already see people wanting to just skip because you've seen this already. I tell you what, let's make it a little different. And I'm just going to let my knife drag down a little bit more of an angle. Maybe this small knife is what I'm looking for here. Ooh, that's a lot of paint. Let's just let it fall off the blade. This is very similar to the mountain technique. Forgot to finish that sentence. Ooh, there we go. I do like this. If you let your hand just kind of fall downward here, that paint will come off where it likes. Give you these highlights. A little thicker in some spots, a little thinner in some spots, but boy, does that look like bark, doesn't it? A little more highlight on this one. I'm coming across a little more than the halfway point. Let's stop there before I cover the whole thing in highlight. And a little bit of shadow here, pulling down. Reloading. Sometimes I whistle or make a windy noise. This helps me. People think you're crazy a little bit. Maybe you are. Now there is a short edge on the small knife as well, so figuring out if there's a little bit of extra color you want to put in there in between your highlights and the brown, you can certainly do that. Maybe a little bit more right there. Get some on that little root system here and there. A little bit underneath the highlight here. Something like that. Now, sometimes here, Bob will take a little bit more white, and let's lighten this up. White with just a little pink in it. We want it significantly lighter. And in a couple of spots here, we'll add a little secondary highlight. I tell you what, even lighter, we want to be able to see it. Little roll of extra highlight on certain parts of this. Not the whole thing, just here and there. Maybe if you can get a little bit, if you have the room for it, you can put a little extra highlight on a couple of these other ones, just where the sun happens to be streaking through. Catching these trunks, just a couple of spots. I kind of match them up a little bit. There we go. like it. Sounds like the dog is finding the mailman's delivering a package or something. All right, a little more paint in my brush. Make sure I can make some branches here. You wouldn't want the same size branches on the close trees. You gotta figure out the perspective a little bit. Bigger tree, bigger branches. A little more paint. There they are. Not so much there. And you know, I don't even think this tree needs very much highlight. Or leaves, I should say. But if you think that you want to put a couple in, this tree might be a little too tall. You don't really see a lot of leaves. A couple here and there look good. Now I'm going to dull this down a little bit, my highlight color. A little bit of the blue, maybe a touch of dark sienna, a little more sap green. Get some right up on the tips of those bristles. And let's get a little bit more shadow in and around these little roots. So it looks like the roots are coming up from the ground, not just sitting on top, you know? Cover it just a little bit. Now, if I were to take just the tiniest amount, since I broke that liquid white out, let's thin it down just a little bit. Maybe we can get a little bit. And there we go. So, for the path, a little bit of the Van Dyke Brown dark sienna mix, and I know Bob on his big old 18 by 24 canvas, he had a little more room there. So he used the knife for this, and I'm just going to use that filbert brush and pulling sideways, we're going to put a little bit of the dark color. Now all the bottoms of these little fingers, that's where I can pull towards the center and sort of cut off where the grass is. Clean it up. That's what we call cleaning up the path, cleaning up the bottom of the grass here. Once you figure that out, oh my God, the world just opens up here. And one of the cool things, and it's one of the things that people have a hard time with, I know I do, it's okay to leave some dark here. Not every little speck of the canvas needs color on it. If you just let there be some dark, it works out just fine. More often than not, it enhances the painting. So, you don't have to fill in every little scrap of the dark there. Clean up what you can, let the rest just sort of hang out there. I'll tell you what, let me wipe the excess paint off my brush. Give the brush a quick little swirl into the paint thinner. Now, let's see what we got. I'm going to take a little bit of the dark sienna and white and just loosely mix them. Don't just want a bunch of paint, just all kind of gooped up on the brush. And I'm going to dance across it now, very, very light, highlighting the path, not covering every little bit. Let it come off kind of where it wants to. The brown will kind of pull off its own highlight if you let it. A little more paint than you think here, focusing more on the center parts of these paths, leaving the outer edges a little dark. Makes your life a little easier. You don't want to have to keep going back and going back to the green and going this way in the path and the grass and the path and the grass. As long as you pull this sideways, it's going to look flat. There we go. Now, I'm not saying you have to, but if it's a little too bold for you, with no paint on your brush, the 1-inch or a fan brush or the 2-inch brush, just graze over it, and you can soften that path to whatever degree you like. Now, if you want to use the knife and make like a rocky effect, like the bark on the tree or snow on the mountain, you could do that quite easily. Bob did this a little bit in the episode. He used mostly just a white to make the path. And you can see here, I want this to be a little wider at the bottom since it's nice and up close to us here. So I can widen that out a little bit, a couple of soft touches, and I think we got ourselves a finished painting. Isn't that something? That turned out pretty well. Let's thin down our color. It's been a while since I've done one of these woodsy scenes. And I'm going to put my little sig right down here at the bottom. A little T, a little S. Ooh, messed that one up. Let's just say it's unique. A little 2 and a 5. That's like a double S. Simpson. So there we go, folks. Bob's Silent Forest. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you picked up a trick or two. I hope you give it a try. Thanks all. I'll see you in the next video.